The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber slid open with their usual soft hiss, but something felt wrong. Ambassador Jake Morrison's chair sat empty at the human delegation table, its blue padding untouched by the familiar weight of Earth's representative. The other ambassadors filed into their designated seats, their various forms creating the colorful tapestry that had defined galactic politics for over 3 centuries. Council Speaker Zethver clicked his mandibles in irritation as he surveyed the chamber. The Catherian leader had called this emergency session specifically to address trade disputes between the Outer Rim colonies, and human mediation was essential for such matters. Jake Morrison had never missed a council meeting in his 12 years of service, and his absence created an uncomfortable void in the proceedings. "Where is the human delegation?" Zethver's translator device rendered his chittering speech into standard galactic. "The emergency protocols require all major species representatives to be present." Ambassador Velteren of the hegemony shifted his massive bulk and spoke with the deep rumble that characterized his species. "Perhaps they are dealing with internal matters. The humans have been unusually quiet in recent months." At the Galactic Research Institute, Dr. Lisa Chang packed the last of her personal belongings into a standard shipping container. Her laboratory had been her second home for 8 years, where she had worked alongside brilliant minds from 17 different species to crack the mysteries of quantum entanglement communication. The breakthrough they had achieved just last month could revolutionize how the galaxy stayed connected across vast distances. Her research partner, Quindle, approached with the graceful movements typical of his Velthian heritage. His 4 arms moved in the gesture of confusion that Lisa had learned to recognize. "You cannot simply abandon our work now. We are so close to completing the prototype network that will connect every world in council space." Lisa sealed her container and turned to face her friend. "I'm sorry, Quindle, but I have received orders to return to Earth immediately. All human personnel are being recalled. But the project needs your expertise with human neural interfaces. Without you, we cannot complete the biological components that make the system work." Lisa walked to her workstation and began the shutdown procedure that would wipe all human contributions from the shared research database. Her fingers moved across the controls with practiced efficiency, erasing months of breakthrough discoveries. "I am truly sorry, but this is not my choice to make." 27 light-years away, Captain Ryan Kelly stood on the bridge of the Endeavour and watched the final evacuation transports dock with his flagship. The massive vessel had been designed to carry diplomatic missions and trade delegations. But today it served as the command center for the largest human exodus in galactic history. Every human civilian, scientist, trader, and diplomat throughout council space was boarding ships bound for destinations unknown to their alien colleagues. "Captain, the last transport from the Catherian mining stations has docked," reported Lieutenant Commander Sam Parker from her position at the communications console. "All 1,847 human personnel are now aboard the evacuation fleet." Ryan nodded and activated the ship-wide communication system. "Attention all vessels, this is Captain Kelly. Operation Homecoming is now entering its final phase. All ships will maintain radio silence until we reach our designated coordinates." The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of life support systems and the occasional beep of navigation computers. Ryan had been briefed on the reasons for this massive withdrawal, but the knowledge sat heavily on his shoulders. 300 years of human participation in galactic civilization was ending not with war or catastrophe, but with a quiet departure that would leave their alien allies confused and abandoned. Admiral Susan Parker reviewed the final departure reports from her command station in Earth's orbital defense grid. The systematic nature of the evacuation impressed even her military mind. Every human facility throughout Council space had been vacated according to precise schedules, with critical systems either removed or permanently disabled to prevent unauthorized access. The mining operation on Kepler 442b had shut down its atmospheric processors and removed all human-designed equipment. The medical research station orbiting Proxima Centauri had wiped its databases and destroyed the prototype medicines that could have saved millions of alien lives. The trading post at Volf 359 had closed its doors and transferred all remaining inventory to human ships. "Admiral, we have confirmation from all sector commanders," reported Colonel Danny Wright from his position at the tactical display. "Every human asset has been successfully evacuated or secured. The alien governments are already sending inquiry messages, but we are maintaining communication blackout as ordered." Susan activated her personal terminal and reviewed the classified orders that had set this operation in motion. The document contained intelligence gathered over months of careful observation, revealing plans by several council species to gradually eliminate human influence once they had acquired enough human technology to become independent. The irony was not lost on her that those same species would soon discover just how dependent they had become back at the Research Institute. Quindle stood in Lisa's empty laboratory and tried to comprehend what had happened. The quantum communication array sat half-assembled on the central workbench, its human-designed neural interface components now nothing more than inert metal and plastic. Without Lisa's expertise in human brain patterns, the revolutionary communication system would never function. Dr. Zelenova, from the Crystalline Collective, entered the laboratory with movements that sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "The humans have departed from our habitat construction project as well. The atmospheric domes they designed for our silicon-based metabolism cannot be maintained without their biological understanding." "This makes no sense," Quindle's four arms gestured in the pattern of deep confusion. The humans were enthusiastic participants in all these projects. Why would they abandon such important work without explanation? The final phase of Operation Homecoming began as the human fleet approached the Sol system. Ryan Kelly watched on his main viewer as Earth's orbital platforms activated a technology that had been secretly developed over decades. A shimmering barrier of energy surrounded the entire solar system, creating an impenetrable wall that would prevent any alien vessel from entering or even communicating with human space. "Sir, the barrier is fully activated," reported Lieutenant Commander Parker. "All alien vessels within the system have been safely transported beyond the perimeter as planned." Ryan activated his personal log and began recording what would be the last human message sent from Council space. "This is Captain Ryan Kelly of the Earth Diplomatic Corps. To our former allies in the Galactic Council, we thank you for 3 centuries of cooperation and friendship. However, recent developments have made it clear that our continued participation in Council affairs is no longer welcome or beneficial to either party." He paused and looked out at the stars that humans would no longer share with their galactic neighbors. "We wish you prosperity and peace in your future endeavors. Earth is withdrawing from all galactic affairs effective immediately. Do not attempt to contact us or breach our system defenses." The transmission ended, and Ryan gave the order that would change galactic history forever. "All ships, welcome home." The barrier around Earth pulsed once with brilliant light, then settled into an invisible wall that would keep humanity isolated from a galaxy that was about to discover just how much they had depended on their human partners. 3 months had passed since the last human ship disappeared behind Earth's mysterious barrier, and the first real crisis struck the Cytherian mining colony on Tau Ceti Prime. Colony Administrator Thekmar watched in growing horror as the atmospheric processors that maintained breathable air for his people began showing critical warning signs across every monitoring station. The massive machines had been designed through a collaboration between human engineers and Cytherian technicians, combining human understanding of biological atmospheric needs with Cytherian expertise in large-scale industrial systems. Without the human maintenance teams that had serviced these processors monthly, the delicate balance of gases was slowly shifting toward levels that would kill every living being on the planet. "How long before the atmosphere becomes toxic?" Thekmar asked his chief engineer, trying to keep the panic from his voice. Chief Engineer Clakevin consulted his readings with visible distress. "At current deterioration rates, we have perhaps 6 weeks before oxygen levels drop below survival minimums. The human-designed biofilters are failing because we do not understand how to replace their organic components." Vecmar activated his emergency communication array and sent a desperate message to the Galactic Council headquarters on Nexus Prime. The message contained detailed readings from the failing atmospheric systems and a plea for immediate technical assistance from any species that might understand human engineering principles on Nexus Prime. Council President Velteran called an emergency session as reports flooded in from across Council space. The massive hegemony leader had ruled the Council for 40 years, but he had never faced a crisis like this. His advisors brought him updates from 17 different worlds, all reporting critical failures of human-designed or human-maintained. SYSTMS Dr. Zarelin from the Velthian Confederacy's Medical Division stood before the assembled council with 4 data tablets clutched in her secondary arms. Her normally graceful movements showed signs of exhaustion as she delivered her report to the emergency session. Honorable Council members, our medical facilities throughout Confederate space are facing an unprecedented crisis. The medications that human biochemists developed for cross-species treatment cannot be synthesized by our laboratories. We lack the understanding of human biological processes that made these drugs possible. She activated a holographic display showing patient statistics from across Velthian space. 37,000 patients currently depend on these medications for survival. Without them, we will see massive casualties within the next 2 months. Ambassador Therelin of the Trading Guilds rose from his seat with obvious agitation. The medical crisis is just the beginning. Trade networks across the galaxy are collapsing because we can no longer access the logistical systems that humans maintained. They served as neutral mediators in our commercial disputes and developed the translation protocols that made interspecies commerce possible. He gestured to his aide, who activated a galactic trade map showing declining commerce routes marked in angry red. Without human mediation, old rivalries are resurfacing. The Crystalline Collective has suspended all trade with the hegemony over a shipping dispute that would have been resolved in hours with human arbitrators. Captain Greg Austin had been one of the few humans to marry into an alien family before the Exodus. His Velthian wife had died 3 years earlier, but he had remained in Council space to continue training alien navigators in advanced hyperspace route calculations. Now he sat in a detention facility on Nexus Prime, the only human available to help with the growing navigation crisis, Navigator Prime. Skelter visited Greg's comfortable quarters to discuss the critical situation facing space travel throughout the galaxy. Captain Austin, we need your help. The hyperspace routes you developed have reduced travel time between systems by 60%, but our navigation computers are refusing to function without human authorization codes. Greg looked up from the book he was reading and shook his head sadly. I cannot help you, Skelter. When the evacuation order came, I was instructed to disable all human-coded systems. The authorization protocols are locked behind quantum encryption that I cannot break even if I wanted to. But surely you understand that millions of beings depend on efficient space travel. Medical supplies, food shipments, emergency evacuations, all of these require the fast routes you created. Greg set down his book and walked to the window overlooking the busy spaceport. I trained 47 navigators from 12 different species in these calculations. If they worked together and shared their knowledge openly instead of hoarding it for a competitive advantage, they could recreate the routes within months. On the planet Crystallos Prime, engineer Crystalla faced an impossible task as the habitat domes that housed her people began showing structural weaknesses. The domes had been designed through an unprecedented collaboration between human architects and crystalline engineers, combining organic curved designs with crystalline geometric principles that neither species could achieve alone. The problem was more complex than simple engineering failure. The habitat domes required constant adjustments based on both the mathematical precision that crystalline minds excelled at and the intuitive biological understanding that humans provided. Without both perspectives working together, the structures were slowly becoming unstable. Crystalla sent harmonic vibrations through her crystalline body to communicate with her engineering team. The resonance patterns in Dome 7 are shifting beyond safe parameters. The human-designed organic support systems are responding incorrectly to our geometric adjustments. Her assistant Thalcor replied with worried frequencies. Perhaps we should contact the humans directly and request assistance? Surely they would not allow millions of crystalline beings to die because of political disputes. The humans have sealed their space completely, no communication in or out. We are alone with this problem. Back on Nexus Prime, the situation deteriorated rapidly as news arrived of the first colony evacuation. The Catherian settlement of New Thesha had become uninhabitable after its atmospheric processors failed completely. 50,000 residents were forced to abandon homes they had built over generations. Cramming into transport ships bound for overcrowded refugee centers, Admiral Korthak of the Hegemony War Fleet pounded his massive fist on the council table as he addressed the emergency session. This crisis demands immediate action. The humans have abandoned their responsibilities to the galactic community and must be compelled to return. President Velteran tried to maintain order as angry voices rose from delegates across the chamber. Admiral, we do not yet understand why the humans departed or what conditions might bring them back. Military action could make the situation worse. Worse, Korthek roared. How could it be worse than watching our colonies die one by one? The humans created this dependency, and now they must face the consequences of abandoning their obligations. Dr. Quindle rose from his seat in the scientific advisory section and requested permission to speak. Honorable Council, I worked closely with human scientists for 8 years. In all that time, they never showed signs of planning this departure. Something must have triggered their decision to leave. He activated his personal datapad and displayed research collaboration statistics. Human scientists were actively engaged in projects that would not be completed for years. Dr. Lisa Shang abandoned work that represented the pinnacle of her career. This was not a planned withdrawal from long-term projects. The council chamber erupted into heated discussions as delegates tried to understand what could have motivated such a drastic action. Some blamed human arrogance and superiority complexes, while others suggested that the council had somehow failed to meet human expectations for galactic cooperation. As the session continued late into the night cycle, reports continued arriving of failing systems throughout council space. The ethereal consciousness announced that their meditation amplifiers, which had been tuned using human psychic research, were no longer functioning properly. The Aquatic Federation reported that their underwater cities were experiencing life support failures because human-designed pressure regulation systems required biological components that no other species understood. The crisis was spreading faster than anyone had anticipated, and the full scope of galactic civilization's dependence on human knowledge was becoming terrifyingly clear. What had seemed like a manageable diplomatic problem 3 months ago was now threatening the survival of billions of beings across hundreds of worlds. Council. President Velteran adjourned the emergency session with the heavy knowledge that traditional solutions would not work for this unprecedented crisis. The galaxy would have to find new ways to survive without the humans who had quietly become essential to almost every aspect of interstellar civilization. 6 months after humanity's mysterious departure, Admiral Korthak stood on the bridge of his flagship Dominion and watched the largest military fleet in galactic history assemble around him. Ships from the Hegemony, Catherian Empire, and Velthian Confederacy had joined forces for the first time in centuries, united by their desperate need to force humanity back into galactic affairs. The massive Hegemony commander had convinced the Council that military pressure was their only remaining option. Diplomatic messages sent toward Earth's barrier had been ignored completely, and the crisis was spreading faster than anyone could control. 3 more colonies had been evacuated in the past month, and entire star systems were facing economic collapse. Admiral, all fleet commanders report ready for Operation Breakthrough, announced Captain Nekver from his position at the tactical station. 237 ships from 14 different species are awaiting your orders. Korthek activated the fleet-wide communication system and addressed the largest military gathering in Council history. Warriors of the galaxy, today we restore the balance that has kept our civilization strong for 300 years. The humans will learn that they cannot abandon their responsibilities without consequences. The fleet moved toward the Sol system, with weapons powered and shields raised. Long-range sensors detected the shimmering energy barrier that surrounded Earth's solar system, but initial scans suggested it was nothing more than an advanced force field that could be overwhelmed with sufficient firepower. The fleet approached the barrier. Admiral Korvac gave the order to commence bombardment. Energy beams from hundreds of different weapon systems struck the barrier simultaneously, creating a light show that could be seen from neighboring star systems. For a moment, it seemed like the barrier flickered and weakened under the massive assault. Then something impossible happened. The barrier began to glow brighter instead of failing, and the attacking fleet's own weapons started losing power. Energy readings showed that the barrier was somehow absorbing the attack and converting it into additional strength. "Sir, our weapon systems are drawing power but producing no effect," reported the weapons officer with growing alarm. "The barrier appears to be feeding on our attacks." Before Admiral Korvac could respond, every ship in the fleet received the same message transmitted directly into their navigation computers. "You are not welcome here. Depart immediately or face the consequences of your aggression." The Admiral ordered a full retreat when several ships reported that their weapons systems had completely shut down and could not be restarted. The most powerful military force in galactic history had been neutralized without a single shot being fired in return. Back on Nexus Prime, Dr. Nathan Brooks sat in a comfortable interview room and faced a panel of desperate council representatives. Nathan had been the only human to remain behind when the evacuation order came, choosing to continue his xenobiology research with the ethereal consciousness rather than return to Earth. Council Intelligence Director Velkonis leaned forward with obvious desperation. "Dr. Brooks, you are our only remaining connection to human knowledge. We need to understand why your people departed so suddenly and what conditions might convince them to return." Nathan had expected this conversation for months and had prepared his answers carefully. The decision to leave was not made lightly. Human Intelligence Services discovered a classified council initiative called Project Independence that aimed to gradually reduce human influence in galactic affairs. The council members exchanged uncomfortable glances as Nathan continued. The plan involved reverse engineering human technologies and redistributing them to other species effectively, making humanity obsolete in galactic civilization. When this was discovered, the leadership decided to leave before being forced out. Ambassador Therlin spoke up with barely controlled anger. That project was theoretical research only. No actual policies were implemented based on those studies. The humans saw it differently, Nathan replied calmly. 300 years of partnership, and the Council was secretly planning to eliminate human participation in their own civilization. The leadership felt betrayed and decided that withdrawal was preferable to gradual marginalization. Meanwhile, in the abandoned research facilities throughout Council space, alien scientists were discovering just how thoroughly humans had protected their technological secrets. Dr. Quindal worked desperately in his laboratory trying to reverse engineer the quantum communication devices that Dr. Lisa Chung had left behind. Every attempt to examine the internal components resulted in the same frustrating outcome. The moment any unauthorized scanning equipment touched the devices, they simply disintegrated into harmless dust. The humans had built self-destruct mechanisms into all their advanced technology, activated remotely during the evacuation. "This is impossible," Quindle muttered as another device crumbled in his hands. "How can we learn from technology that destroys itself when studied?" His research assistant Melteron brought him yet another failed experiment. "Perhaps the humans never intended for us to understand their technology. Maybe they always planned to keep us dependent on their knowledge." The economic situation grew more desperate each day as trade networks continued collapsing throughout the galaxy. Merchant Prince Siltherin of the Trading Guild stood before the Emergency Council session with reports that would have been unthinkable just months earlier. "Honorable delegates, entire sectors are now facing critical shortages of essential materials. The distribution networks that humans maintained for 3 centuries have completely broken down. Without their coordination, we cannot efficiently move resources between systems. He activated a holographic display showing supply chain failures across dozens of star systems. The crystalline collective is running out of the rare minerals they need for reproduction. The Aquatic Federation cannot obtain the organic compounds necessary for their underwater agriculture. Even basic medical supplies are becoming scarce because we no longer have the logistical expertise to manage complex distribution networks. Political tensions escalated when the hegemony accused the Velthian Confederacy of hoarding the last functional human medical equipment. Ambassador Theralin and Admiral Korthak faced each other across the council chamber with barely restrained hostility. Your people are keeping life-saving equipment while hegemony citizens die, Korthak accused with his deep, rumbling voice. This violates every principle of council cooperation. We are preserving the equipment for study so that we might learn to replicate it, Theralin replied with cold dignity. Sharing it now would only delay the inevitable failure when it breaks down. The argument escalated until both ambassadors were on their feet, their respective security details moving closer with obvious tension. President Velteren had to call for order as the 1,000-year-old alliance that had maintained galactic peace showed signs of complete breakdown. Council Intelligence Director Velkonis launched a desperate investigation using stealth probes, designed to slip past Earth's barrier and gather intelligence about human activities. The probes were equipped with the most advanced cloaking technology available to Council science, representing years of development by the galaxy's best engineers. 3 weeks later, the probes returned with data that shocked the intelligence community. The images they transmitted showed thriving human colonies in star systems that had never appeared on any Council star charts. Massive space stations and planetary settlements suggested that humanity had been preparing for this departure. For decades, they have been planning this withdrawal for much longer than we suspected, Velkonis reported to the emergency session. These installations required years to construct and populate. The humans have created an entirely separate civilization, beyond our knowledge. The revelation that humanity had been secretly developing independent space territories while maintaining their public role in Council affairs sent shockwaves through the political establishment. The discovery suggested that human departure was not a desperate reaction to recent events, but the culmination of a long-term strategy that had been in development for generations. As reports continued flowing in from across the galaxy, it became clear that the Council faced an existential crisis that threatened not just their technology and economy, but the very foundation of their civilization. The realization that they had become completely dependent on a species that had been planning to leave them behind created a level of political instability that had not been seen since the Council's founding a millennium earlier. 1 year after humanity's departure, the Galactic Council faced its darkest hour as 3 separate wars erupted across former Council space. The breakdown of human-mediated trade agreements had triggered resource conflicts that threatened to tear apart 1,000 years of carefully maintained peace. The first war began when the crystalline collective invaded hegemony mining territories, desperate for the rare minerals they needed for their reproductive cycles. Without human arbitrators to resolve the dispute peacefully, both species had resorted to military action. Admiral Korthak commanded the hegemony defense forces from the bridge of his flagship as crystalline ships bombarded mining stations throughout the Kepler sector. Sir, the crystalline fleet has destroyed the primary extraction facility on Kepler 438b, reported his tactical officer with grim efficiency. They are demanding immediate access to the lithium deposits that our treaty guaranteed would remain under hegemony control. Korthak watched the tactical display with growing frustration. These conflicts had been unthinkable when human diplomats maintained the delicate balance between competing species' interests. Prepare to engage their main fleet. If they want our resources, they will have to take them by force. The Second War erupted in the Outer Rim territories where the Aquatic Federation and Velthian Confederacy fought over water-rich worlds that both species needed for survival. without the complex resource-sharing agreements that humans had negotiated. Over decades, old territorial disputes had resurfaced with deadly consequences. Confederate Admiral Zexterin coordinated her fleet's assault on the Aquatic Federation's newest colony from her command ship's battle center. All ships target their underwater cities first. We need those ocean worlds more than they do. The third conflict involved over a dozen smaller species fighting for control of the trade routes that humans had once maintained as neutral pathways. Without human oversight, these routes had become contested territory where merchant ships required military escorts to avoid being captured by competing factions on the distant research world of Kepler 186f. Dr. Elena Martinez finally broke the year-long silence that had surrounded humanity's departure. The human archaeologist had been studying ancient ruins when the evacuation order came, but she had chosen to remain behind to complete her research rather than abandon a decade of work. Her former colleague Dr. Quindall received Elena's message through encrypted channels that bypassed the general communications blackout. The Velthian scientist had been searching for any human contact since the departure, hoping to understand what had gone so terribly wrong. Quindall, my old friend, I know you have been trying to reach human space for months, Elena's message began. I cannot remain silent while the galaxy tears itself apart. What I'm about to tell you will shock the Council, but they need to understand the truth about why we left. Elena's revelation contained intelligence data that human agents had gathered over months of careful observation. The Council's Project Independence was not theoretical research as your leaders claimed. 3 species had already begun implementing plans to eliminate human influence once they acquired enough of our technology to become independent. The message included classified communications between hegemony, Catherian, and Velthian leadership, discussing timelines for removing humans from key positions throughout Council space. Admiral Korvik personally approved plans to seize human research facilities and force our scientists to work under alien supervision. The Catherian Empire intended to declare human colonies as protectorates under their direct control. When Quindall shared Elena's message with sympathetic council members, it triggered the largest political crisis in galactic history. Progressive leaders like President Velteran found themselves defending policies they had never known existed, while traditionalist factions demanded immediate action to suppress what they called human propaganda. The revelation split the Council down the middle as reformist leaders clashed with traditionalists over the fundamental structure of galactic civilization. General Kyrix of the Hegemony led the militant faction that demanded the Council declare formal war on humanity and seize their hidden colonies by force. The humans have betrayed their obligations to galactic society, Kyrix declared during an emergency session. They created dependencies that they knew would cause suffering when they abandoned us. This is an act of war that demands military response. On the opposite side, the ethereal consciousness advocated for peaceful negotiation and fundamental reforms to address the grievances that had driven humanity away. Ambassador Lingver spoke for dozens of smaller species that had been marginalized under the old council structure. Perhaps the humans were right to fear for their future in our civilization. Lingver's telepathic communication reached every mind in the chamber. If we were planning to eliminate their influence, can we blame them for choosing to leave before being forced out? The political crisis deepened when Captain Rachel Stone arrived at Nexus Prime aboard a small human vessel flying under a flag of truce. Her arrival marked the first official human contact since the barrier around Earth had been established, and her presence created chaos in the council chambers. Rachel's message to the assembled delegates was brief and direct. The United Earth government offers the Galactic Council one final opportunity to prevent the complete collapse of galactic civilization. We demand fundamental reforms that grant equal representation to all species and end the dominance of the founding races. She activated a holographic display showing formal alliance agreements between humanity and 47 different species. These civilizations have already signed preliminary agreements to join a new galactic organization based on principles of equality and mutual cooperation. The Council has 30 days to implement similar reforms or face the establishment of a competing government that will offer genuine representation to all species. The ultimatum triggered immediate chaos as delegates realized that nearly half of Council member species had been secretly negotiating with humanity. Ambassador Lingvar publicly supported the human demands, revealing that the refugee coalition and dozens of smaller species had been planning to leave the Council even before humanity's departure. Admiral Korvthak responded to the ultimatum with barely controlled rage. The humans dare to threaten us after abandoning their responsibilities and causing this crisis. We should arrest their messenger and force them to repair the damage they have caused. The tension in the chamber reached a breaking point when hegemony extremists attempted to assassinate Captain Stone during a recess in the negotiations. 3 hegemony commandos armed with advanced plasma weapons moved to attack the human diplomat as she walked through the station's diplomatic quarters. The assassination attempt failed spectacularly when Captain Stone activated previously unknown defensive technology that created an energy field around her body. The plasma bolts simply disappeared when they hit the field, while the attackers found themselves paralyzed by some form of neural disruption weapon. Gentlemen, you seem to be under the impression that humanity departed because we were weak or vulnerable, Rachel said calmly as security forces arrested the would-be assassins. This was never the case. We left by choice, not from necessity. The failed assassination proved that humanity had never been truly defenseless against Council aggression and had possessed advanced military technology that they had chosen not to reveal during their centuries of peaceful cooperation. The demonstration of human defensive capabilities sent shockwaves through the Council as leaders realized they had completely misjudged humanity's strategic position. Council intelligence. Director Velkonis briefed the emergency session on the implications of the assassination attempt. If the humans possess defensive technology this advanced, we must assume their offensive capabilities are equally sophisticated. Military action against human space would be suicide for any attacking force. As the 30-day deadline approached, the Council found itself divided between 3 factions that could not agree on any response to the human ultimatum. The traditionalists demanded military action despite the obvious futility. The reformists pushed for immediate acceptance of human demands, and a growing number of species simply announced their intention to leave the Council entirely and join humanity's new organization. 2 years after humanity's departure, the galaxy had transformed into something completely different from the unified civilization that had existed for 1,000 years. The Galactic Council had split into 2 separate organizations, each claiming to represent the future of interstellar cooperation. The Reformed Council operated from a new station built in neutral space, where progressive leaders like Dr. Quindile and President Velteran had implemented the democratic reforms that humanity had demanded. Every species, regardless of size or military power, held equal representation in the new government structure. The old system where founding races dominated smaller civilizations had been completely abolished. Admiral Chris Turner stood before the Reformed Council as humanity's first ambassador since the Exodus, but his role was fundamentally different from the diplomatic relationships of the past. Humans no longer served as mediators or leaders in galactic affairs, instead participating as equals among the dozens of species that had joined the reformed government. Honorable delegates, humanity is prepared to resume limited cooperation with galactic civilization under the new framework you have established, Chris announced to the assembled representatives. However, our participation will be based on strict equality and mutual respect rather than the paternalistic relationships of the past. The old council, still operating from Nexus Prime under Admiral Korvthak's military leadership, had devolved into a defensive alliance focused on maintaining the power of the traditional founding species. Their influence shrank daily as Colony. After Colony declared independence or defected to the Reformed Council, without the economic benefits of human technology and coordination, the old council struggled to maintain even basic services for their remaining members. The hegemony's mining operations had become inefficient without human atmospheric processors, while Cytherian colonies faced constant shortages of essential supplies that the old trade networks had once provided automatically. Dr. Lisa Shang had returned from her exile to establish the interspecies university on a world that belonged to no single government. The research facility represented a completely new approach to galactic cooperation, where humans and aliens worked together as equals rather than in the hierarchical relationships that had characterized council research for centuries. Her former colleague Quindal served as the university's first non-human dean, a position that would have been impossible under the old council structure. Together, they supervised research projects that involved scientists from over 30 different species, all contributing their unique perspectives to solve problems that no single civilization could handle alone. The greatest discovery we have made here is not technological, Lisa explained to a group of visiting diplomats during a tour of the research facilities. We have learned that genuine cooperation produces better results than the dependent relationships we maintained for so long. The university's first major breakthrough came when a team of crystalline and Velthian researchers successfully recreated the atmospheric processors that had failed on Cytherian colonies. Without human supervision or guidance, they had developed an entirely new approach that was actually more efficient than the original human designs. We spent so long depending on human solutions that we never explored our own capabilities, explained researcher Kristalla as she demonstrated the new atmospheric control systems. Independence forced us to discover technologies that we might never have developed while relying on human expertise. Meanwhile, Captain Rachel Stone traveled throughout the galaxy as humanity's roving ambassador, establishing bilateral relationships with individual worlds and species outside the traditional council framework. Her mission was to build a new model of interstellar civilization based on voluntary cooperation, rather than centralized authority. On the former hegemony world of Altair Prime, she met with Governor Thakos to discuss trade agreements that would benefit both human and Cytherian colonies. The negotiations took place as equals, with neither species holding dominant authority over the other. Your people have learned to maintain your atmospheric systems without human assistance, Rachel observed as she toured the thriving colony. This is exactly the kind of independence that will make our future cooperation more stable and beneficial for everyone. The new bilateral relationship model proved remarkably successful as species discovered they could achieve more through voluntary partnerships than they had under the old council's mandatory cooperation. Trade flowed more freely when it was based on mutual benefit rather than council-mandated resource distribution. The contrast between the two approaches became clear when the reformed council announced the establishment of the first joint colony since humanity's return. The world of New Harmony would be governed by representatives from 5 different species, with no single civilization holding dominant authority. Human engineer Mark Davis worked alongside Velthian architect Zaltaran and crystalline designer Sylvanos to create a settlement where multiple species could live together as equals. Each group contributed their unique strengths to the colony's development without anyone serving as the dominant partner. This is what galactic civilization should have been from the beginning, Mark explained as he showed visitors through the integrated habitat systems. Everyone contributes according to their abilities and benefits according to their needs, with no hierarchy based on technological advancement or military power. The success of New Harmony attracted attention from across the galaxy as species that had never cooperated before began proposing similar joint ventures. The colony demonstrated that genuine cooperation was not only possible but produced better results than the old system of human leadership and alien dependence. Back on Nexus Prime, Admiral Korfik watched his old council shrink as more members declared independence or defected to the reformed council. The hegemony leader had spent his entire career building military power, but he was discovering that force could not compel the cooperation that galactic civilization required. Sir, the Aquatic Federation has announced their withdrawal from the council, reported his aide with barely concealed despair. They are the seventh major species to leave this month. Corfix stared at the tactical display showing Old Council territory shrinking daily. How many members do we have left? 12 species, sir, and 3 of those have already begun negotiations with the Reformed Council. The Old Council's collapse accelerated when the Catherian Empire announced that they were dissolving their military alliance with the hegemony and pursuing individual relationships with human colonies. Without the unity that human mediation had once provided, the traditional powers found themselves unable to maintain their alliance. As the second anniversary of humanity's departure approached, Ambassador Chris Turner addressed both councils simultaneously through a galactic broadcast that reached every inhabited system. His message represented humanity's final answer to the crisis that had consumed galactic civilization for 2 years. People of the galaxy, humanity returns to interstellar affairs not as your leaders or your dependents, but as your equals. We will participate in building a more mature civilization based on voluntary cooperation rather than imposed authority. He gestured to the data displays showing the success of New Harmony and the dozens of bilateral agreements that had replaced the Old Council's centralized control. The age of any single species dominating galactic affairs has ended. What emerges from this crisis will be stronger because it is based on the genuine contributions of all our civilizations. The broadcast concluded with the announcement that Earth's barrier would be permanently lowered, allowing free travel and communication with human space for the first time in 2 years. However, the galaxy that would reconnect with humanity was fundamentally different from the one they had left behind, transformed by the crisis into something more mature and equitable than anyone had thought possible.